that you had an opportunity to look at the literature template that was posted on WebiLang. Because we're going to be using this to frame our discussion so that we can have a systematic way of looking at literature, and because otherwise it's easy to get lost, especially in a language other than your native one. So does everyone see this template for analyzing works of literature that I put on the whiteboard?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the different factors or aspects of a couple of Russian works. This is scary for me, but you're going to be able to help me. But first, let's talk in general about what these things are. So let me give you something I want you each to have something to work on when we get to it, and let me tell you what those might be. Alina, you get to do form, and Anna Kondrina, will you please do verisimilitude? We're going to do these in a minute after we talk about the different kinds of works that are listed above that. Characters, that's going to be Irina. And conflict, that's going to be Nadia. And Natasha, point of view or perspective. Then we're going to, let's see, setting. That will be Alina. Language, Irina. Tone, Anna. And time and duration, Natasha. So we'll talk about these factors and what they are in a little bit. That's what I'm going to ask you to do, explain what these forms are relative to what you saw in the longer document like this posted on WebiLang. So think about literature that you have read. And what kind of a work might be a psychological work? Can you think of anything that you've read in any language that might be a psychological work? One that focuses on the character's inner thoughts. let's think about the Three Bears. What kind of a work is the Three Bears? Psychological, sociological, philosophical, didactic, or escapist? What would you say?
It's fairy tale.
It's a fairy tale. Okay, so what category do you think that would fit into here?
I think didactic books in the fairy tale.
And a didactic work, you would say that because?
Because actually in this fairy tale, we know about girl which lost in the forest, and about depressions of this thing.
So a didactic work should teach us something, maybe have a moral message. And do you think that's true of fairy tales in general, and in the Three Bears in particular?
I think in this fairy tale it's moral about children shouldn't lost without their parents.
Yes, they shouldn't wander around in the woods. And anything else that we learned from the Three Bears besides that?
Maybe it doesn't have some with the moral sense because it's the children's fairy tale simply, and it's a very simple story for little child without any global thoughts, and it, and that's why we can't to determine this story as psychological or to philosophy, and it's only funny story with the 3 times repetition.
Well, just because it's a simple children's story doesn't mean that it doesn't have a moral. Actually, most all of the fables or children's stories have some kind of moral message. So this one is don't wander off into the forest, or maybe how about don't go into a strange house, and or don't eat the food that's there, or don't mess up somebody's bed and then fall asleep there. I think there are lots of moral messages there. And so then the other Russian example that we are going to look at a bit today is we don't know how to say goodbye. What kind of a work would you say that is? It's not didactic. What do you think, Natasha?
Maybe it relates to
Psychological work, yes, I think we might get to that. I think that, and what makes you say that?
I think so because in this verse there is a sense
that we need to get by reading this verse and analyzing some words and
is it about how people behave?
Yes, this verse is about people's behavior and relationships, and as I know other verses of this order of the Anahatava, her verses are always about love.
Yes. Her poetry in general is love poetry. I haven't read very much of it, but I like it a lot. So what kind of, let's see, I can think of examples in French, but I don't know too many in Russian. So what would be an escapist work that you've read? What's escapist? Think of something on TV. What's an example of escapist?
Example of the what?
Escapist. I put it in the chat. Escapist literature, or we could also talk about
We should tell about escapist literature.
yes.
As for Russian writers, there are such writers as Lermontov. He wrote the hero of our time. This is not a poem. It was written without any rhythm, but it's several stories in one book about a person who couldn't understand reality of his time. He was very misunderstandable for other people, and he saw many things in the other way, not for other people. Misunderstood. Yes, thank you.
So if you think about films, tell me about a film that's a fantasy.
Can you repeat the question, sir, about?
If we're still talking about escapist literature or fantasy or science fiction. Oh, that's good. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Ah, what a wonderful book that is. Okay. A sociological work might be anything written by Émile Zola. He wrote at the end of the 19th century in France about the terrible conditions of the workers. can you think of anything else? Sociological would be different from psychological in what way? A sociological work is going to talk about what? One person or many people?
Psychological work.
Sociological. What word can you think of? What noun can you think of that begins socio or would be related in that way to that part of the root of the verb, of the word?
Society, so it's
Yes.
about groups of people.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so Zola is my French example, and can you think of a Russian example of someone who wrote fiction about society? It doesn't have to be Russian, but there are some good ones. Or maybe an American writer. Or let's see, there's Balzac in France. Victor Hugo. Who else writes wonderful novels about the whole society and how they work?
Maybe Lev Tolstoy.
Tolstoy, yes, Tolstoy. Has, I'm sorry, who would you put it in the chat, please? And can you think of a philosophical work? Since my background is French, you're going to always hear French things from me. An existentialist novel by Albert Camus called L'étranger, the stranger, would be a philosophical work, or Voltaire, Candide. Any other writer that you can think about whose works reflect a philosophical presentation?
Maybe Franz Kafka.
Ah, yes. Okay, well, that gives you some general ideas about them. So let's think about the form. And what we're looking at is a template of ways to talk about literature. So if you need to look at examples, let's start with "We don't know how to say goodbye" or "The Three Bears," and use those two as our examples. Alina, can you talk about the form of either the three bears or we don't know how to say goodbye? How's the text divided?
As for three bears, there is no formal division, but we can see some effects which author did. There is a few times repetition when the bears asked about their things, about food, slaves, and I don't remember exactly. We see the same things and words several times. Maybe it's an informal division of this fairy tale. And there is a beginning of the main evidence and the conclusion when a girl went out from their home.
Yes, I think that's good. You could look at it in terms of scenes where in the beginning the bears have their food ready to eat, and then they decide they need to go for a walk while it cools, so they're gone. The little girl, and the time that she spends there in getting lost, and then in the house, and then when the bears return, that you might look at that as episodes. But a thematic way of looking at it is good. A time division is good, but there are no formal divisions. So if you look at the form of we don't know how to say goodbye, did I load that? I did not.
There are scenes. This poem is divided on scenes, and they are connected between themselves for good sounding, and there is no some episodes, but this is about feeling of people in most.
Yes, a poem is divided quite often, and this one is too. I'm sorry I haven't put it up yet. Into stanzas, usually groups of lines, and then the numbers of groups. That's a common way of looking at poetry. I think you've done a very good job of explaining our two examples. And Anna Kondrina, can you talk about verisimilitude? Let's look at the three bears in terms of verisimilitude.
I think that we can imagine this story like in a film or in real life. And moreover, I think that everyone can imagine their own story in this poem. Maybe because it's not about something, not about situation in it's not a specific maybe situation, but everybody can imagine themselves in this.
Yes, it is possible to think about situations like that. If you've ever been part of a couple and wondering what to do next, that is certainly possible. So, or you might imagine knowing someone like that who's been in that situation. So, and so let's consider the three bears, Anna, in terms of verisimilitude. Can you imagine that having really happened?
Oh, yes. This is me. Like in the poem.
No, using the three bears.
Oh no, no. Like in the fairy tale, no. This is fairy tale for children, and of course, this situation may not be in real life.
Okay, so now, what if you were to accept the possibility that animals could talk as being real instead of imaginary? Then, or if you could, in your mind's eye, say, these are people living in a small cottage in the forest, and someone, another person wanders in. How much would that change the verisimilitude? See if you can repeat back the question that I've asked you to think about. Because I think maybe some of the others of you can help. My question is a kind of question about verisimilitude and the three bears, which we already know bears don't talk, right? That's the first premise that is violated in this story. But if Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear were really people instead of bears, would the story then be more credible?
Yes,
So can you imagine that story happening with people?
If
Yes.
if somebody touches the spoon of mine, for example, I couldn't to understand it if I couldn't see this process, how he or she touch my spoon. I can't feel it, but the bears, when they don't see the girl, they have understood yet had understood yet on that moment that somebody was in their home without seeing. Real people can't do it.
So yeah, I think that that's good. I mean, the only thing then that stands, the only thing that makes it hard to believe is the fact that the main characters are animals and not people. And So if somebody came into my home when I wasn't there and got stuff out of my refrigerator and helped themselves to the food, and then climbed into my bed and I come home, I would be scared, and I might call the police. So I think you could write a very different kind of story about people in this situation. And so it's kind of interesting to see what one thing makes it less credible. And Anna Kundrina, I think you did a good job for both of our examples in bringing that out. Now, Irina, can you talk about characters?
Of three bears.
Yes, for the three bears.
I think in the story, four main characters is they are little girl, and three bears, mother, father, and little bear, their son. I think these characters are dynamic because we see in the story some situation when they show us their attention, their behavior, and also of the story don't reveal the characters to read using direct commentary. We don't see in this picture some descriptions of the bears or girl. We see that the girl is little, and the bears live in their house, and are some aggressive, but I think it's justified because in their home it's stranger, and it's very dangerous for bears. And sometimes I think that the bears are the types of real people, and some disabled people in this situation.
And so can we, are you familiar enough with the poem that you can talk about the characters in the poem, or do I need to load it? Let me see if I...
Can you write your question?
Okay. Let me do that. Okay. So let's make it a little bigger here so we could actually consider reading it.
I should talk about practice of we don't know how to say goodbye.
Yes, and you can scroll it to look at either the English or the Russian, but I'm going to look at the English.
Okay. In this poem are two main characters. I think it's a woman and a man. We don't know about the look or the behavior, but we know that they are in some relationship which are dynamic, I think. And also author don't reveal the characters to the reader using direct commentary. They don't think about the something, but there are some dynamics because firstly they are in charge and don't look to each other, but then they have some relationship and I think between men and women is um, something like misunderstanding in the relationship, and it's a puzzle and a riddle for us what author wants to say about the characters, and everyone has their only meaning of this poem and of meaning of relationship man and woman in this story.
Okay, so who is the I? Who's the narrator in this? Is it the man or the woman? What do you think? What evidence is there in the text?
I think the woman is in the text.
And how do you decide that?
I think it's woman because the author of this poem is Anna Akhmatova, and I like Anna Akhmatova, but I know that some characteristics of your creation is that she wrote it from the first person, from she, and I think it's woman because I'm not matter of point.
Okay, so I'm going to say, if you didn't know it was Anna Akhmatova, I can't get her last name right. Would you pronounce her last name?
Akhmatova.
Akhmatova. If you didn't know who the author was of this poem, if you didn't know it was this very famous and wonderful poet who happens to be a woman, and you didn't know anything else outside these few lines in this poem written in 1917, how would you know that I am a woman and you are a man in this text, just from those few lines of poetry?
Maybe in this poem are many doubts, and I think for women doubts are more characterized than for men. And women often like yes or no, I do it or I didn't do it, and men are more stated than women.
Okay, so what if we just look at the words? What you're doing is valid, but you're drawing from the words some assumptions. So we have, you're moody, I am your shadow. You have, they do things together, sighing to each other, sitting together, wandering shoulder to shoulder. It's the next to the last line that for me says, it's most likely that the woman is talking to the man. That stick in your hand is tracing mansions in which we shall always be together, the last two lines. Can you imagine a woman in 1917 drawing with a stick in her hand on the snow?
No,
I think it's much more likely to be the man who's got the big plan. But that's kind of the way that we're going to want to look at at literature, looking at sometimes at very small clues that are in the text, rather than basing what we know about it outside the particular text. So I think you're right, and I don't disagree with anything you say. I'm just trying to say we can draw it out of the text without any outside knowledge. And I know that this is my experience, because so often I have studied poetry from the Middle Ages, where very little is known about the writer. And so all you can do is see what is there from the text. So let's talk about point of view. Natasha, can you do that, please?
Yes. Speaking of point of view or perspective, we notice that the woman tells the story. She is the narrator. It was said by Irina, and I want to add that there are some details by which helps. There are some details which help us to determine the narrator, and in some lines we see feelings of this woman.
Yes.
And we can say that the narrator is trustworthy because there are so many feelings, and it's described so well. For example, sighing to each other, or we shall always be together. And I think that there are such feelings as such as farewell and maybe sadness between women and men.
And so,
and despair maybe also.
And so, do you think that this is an interior monologue, or is she talking to him?
I think that it's definitely monologue, because we see some we see thinking. We see thinking in the lines. For example, the question, why we differ from the rest? This question woman asks from herself, and this is in internal feelings, and I guess that this woman reflects them in this poem. I don't think that.
Well, good. I think you explained that very clearly. And then we're going to come back to you, Alina, and talk about the setting. And let's look at that in terms of the poem. Alina, can you talk about the setting?
Talk about the set.
The setting.
What?
Where? This is
second.
the.
Okay.
This is when and where the events happen, and so where does the action take place? Is there more than one place in the poem, since we have that here?
In the fairy tale, the action took place in the forest. There were big and beautiful forest in the some little form of bears and only there. There is no what can I say about the fairy tales action place. It's not so interesting, but as for the poem, we may imagine absolutely everything. She described how they walked and shoulder to shoulder. It may be in the street, it may be on the near the river with the beautiful view, with a romantical view, or maybe on the contrary with the better weather, because the poem is in a sad and sorrowful form was written. It may be everywhere to want. I don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you, how many places do they go in the poem?
How many places?
Yes. First, they're taking a walk, right? They're taking a walk first, and then where do they go?
She describes the church.
Yes, they go in the church.
Church, and maybe. Sorry, I got you.
After the church, they go outside the church, and where is that place they go after that? The graveyard. The graveyard, the churchyard, or the cemetery.
But she wrote about all it not in such form that they was being there. Maybe it seemed to me in the beginning that she remembered this site where she walked together and where they work together. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe maybe while writing with but to be exact, this is church, a graveyard, and that's all.
Okay, so what time of day it is not accidental either. And in the third line of the poem, already the sun is going down. What time of day is it?
In English, it will be twilight.
Twilight?
Twilight, yes.
Yes, it's the end of the day. The sun is going down. It's twilight. Then, so if you were filming this, that would be the first scene, maybe the first 4 lines, and then they go into the church, and it's a different setting. What happens in the church? What do they watch?
They watch marriages, baptism, message for the dead.
Okay, baptisms, marriages, masses for the dead. So a baptism is for an early stage of life. That means it has to do with births and babies. And another stage of life is marriages. And then masses for the dead when people die. So you have the whole lifespan they're watching births, deaths, births, marriages, and death. And yet that's not working for them. That's not fitting. So then they go to the graveyard. Okay, it's the end of the day. It's they've been in the church. That doesn't feel right. Then this third setting, in the graveyard, what time of year is it?
Winter.
Yes, and you know that because?
Because they are going to, or they were going to sit on the snow, trampled snow.
Yes, on the trampled snow. It's not fresh, beautiful, shining white snow. It's trampled. It's already been used. So these are really kind of negative images. Everything is ending. The day is ending. Their life is passing by, and then they sit in the graveyard. And so and would you say this is very visual or not? Alina, does this seem very visual to you? Can you imagine this scene in your mind's eye?
Very amazing for me. I can imagine graveyard and trampled snow, and this snow imagined for me very bright and with very bright and clear, shining, brilliant, and I even imagine the winter with the so brilliant snow and holidays.
Yes. Okay, good. Let's, Anna, can you talk a little bit about the tone?
As I said, this poem is realistic. You can imagine it. And what about dominant emotion? I think it is a song about maybe unfulfilled dreams. Maybe and we can come up with details of this story. Because there are no it has places, church, and we know that it's winter, but we can imagine some details that not they're not in this poem. So what about
and would you say there is a dominant emotion?
I think dominant emotion is so maybe so about unfulfilled dreams that they don't know how to say goodbye, and they don't want to part.
So, what words does the narrator? What words does the narrator say that indicates their emotional state? In the first stanza, she says, "You're moody. I'm your shadow." What's moody mean?
Moody is
The person who is thinking about something.
It's like sad or down.
Yes, sad. Okay, so we know she thinks he's sad, and I am your shadow. How is she feeling? He's sad, and she's sad too. Yes, that's reflected as if he were the sun and she were his shadow, she'd still be reflecting his mood. So if he feels bad, she feels bad. So then they go inside the church, and but they're not really participating in those baptisms, marriages, and masses for the dead. And we know that because he says, "Why are we different from the rest?" So what kind of emotion is she feeling?
maybe it's inspiration.
Yes. Despair even. Yes, that's not too strong. It's a lament, an expression of sadness. So then they're sort of exiled from the church. They leave the church and they sit in the graveyard. What's there that contributes to the atmosphere of the emotional picture that she's drawing here? Are graveyards cheery places?
No.
Not really, no. Is the snow clean and white? No, it's trampled. And are they singing a love song to each other? No, they're sighing. They're sighing. And finally, is he present in the moment? Is he talking about the now? Or is he lost in the future? Neither one of them want to be in the here and now because they're trying to say goodbye and they don't know how to do that.
Maybe he even wants to say goodbye, so
Ah, that's interesting. You think he might want to?
if she is sad, there is a reason for it, and she is sad too, and their dialogue is not warm. There is no dialogue. She is moody, and there should be some final episode.
Yeah, I could see that, except he wants to talk about the future. The stick in his hand is tracing mansions in which we shall always be together. That doesn't sound like he's really wanting to get rid of her. I think he's just trying to avoid the reality of having to say goodbye.
It's a bit more positive variant.
Yes, he'd like it to be more positive than it is. So, Natasha, can you talk about time and duration in this poem?
Yes. In my opinion, the time in the poem is foreshortened. There are cuts, and I think that all scenes are wet because we don't know exactly if it now or it could be in the future. So we don't have clear sense of time passing because there are so many scenes, church and the cemetery. So maybe there are some flashbacks too because they're always saying about walking shoulder to shoulder together. So it might be a flashback.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is something vague about the time for my mind. First, we do have a time marker in the first stanza already the sun is going down. That is a time marker. But in the second one, we lose that in the vague, because if they're watching baptisms, marriages, and masses for the dead, how long are they spending in the church? I mean, if you look at that literally, unless it's a really, really big church, I find it difficult to imagine a baptism, a marriage, and a mass for the dead all taking place within the span of time I would want to sit in church. Maybe that's just me. But also, they're all plural. It's not just a baptism, a marriage, a mass for the dead. These are plural. And I can only work with the English, so you have to tell me if the English doesn't work well with the Russian. But if they're watching all those things, then we've slipped out of a literal passage of time here into something that goes on all the time. We watch life going by, birth, marriage, death. And then, dang, we don't fit that pattern. And so then you go outside again, and so then we get or else. So then maybe this is all in her head. Let's step inside a church. The second stanza begins, and then, or else let's sit in the graveyard. Either one of those things. This is kind of maybe something that is going on in her head. Or maybe they have done this, maybe it's taking them a really long time to say goodbye. And so they've been in and out of the church together maybe a long time, watching baptisms, marriages, and masses for the dead. But then they go get lost in the future. I think that it's hard to tell how long it lasts, as you said, Natasha. And I realize that we have come to the end of our time, and maybe we don't know how to say goodbye either. Next time, you have a story to read. It's an American story written at the end of the 19th century. Some of the vocabulary may be difficult for you. And we will be talking, it's very short, however, as stories go. And so we will have a chance to apply some of these factors to that story, and this kind of an analysis gives you a chance to do close reading, I think. We didn't get through all of the factors today, but that's okay. I think you have good notes to work from, and I think you're going to enjoy the story. And I look forward to sharing it with you. So I think you've done a great job today, and I thank you for working so hard on it, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
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 Bye.